Hey everyone, Chris here. I'm going to share my screen and we are going to get underway with week 5. All right. So, week 5. Uh, here. Yeah, there we go. This week we're going to be talking about assessing individuals. I wanted to start with a brief check-in. So if y'all will find your seat or the ground or however uh, you might be either standing or sitting for this, but I wanted to take you through a quick spine roll, just to kind of get us into this moment together. So if you take a moment, just find the ground in whatever way you are standing or sitting, um, and then let your head sink forward as if it was like filled with sand or something heavy. Just kind of feel that stretch in your neck. And then once you get to the part of your neck that starts to go into your shoulder blades, go ahead and release that down. And just keep rolling. Find your spine. And you can just kind of hang like that for a minute. And then if you start to roll up, it's just kind of the reverse. Um, it's almost like tucking your tailbone in order to kind of bring it back up, but like you just kind of stack each vertebra on top of each other. See, I'm sitting a lot straighter now too. Um, these moments can probably, they don't just help me center in the work, but there are things that you can do one-on-one with clients, or with a group if you're feeling like the energy's a little scattered. So that's why I'm throwing these in here too. Some general reminders for you. The individual meeting, so one-on-one meeting with me via Zoom, is due by Monday, October 20th. You can sign up for a time anytime between now and then, through my Calendly link, which is in um, the syllabus. I've had 2 students already sign up and do their visits with me, and then I've got a third this week. So there's plenty of opportunity to get that out of the way now, while you're probably still figuring some stuff out, but maybe have a bit more time, as opposed to wait until later on, when it might get a little harder starting in October. You can ask your classmates. I don't bite, especially not virtually. A reminder that you just got your weekly readings and activities to do, and then that weekly minute paper just to check in, check off everything you've done, and then, answer those brief questions. Let me know if there's anything that needs changing or fixing, or, stuff that you want to learn from me particularly. Um, and I mentioned last time around, there are dates up for the 3 optional synchronous Zoom meetings. The first meeting is a week from today. I'm recording this on Monday, September 15th. So the first Zoom meeting will be at 6 p.m. your time, 8 p.m. my time, on September 22nd. So we'll be going over just the first, like the assignments essentially. I'm also getting some uh, examples ready for you, and I'll publish those shortly here too, okay? So going straight in. So week 5, this is what we're going to be covering. I have a background working with folks in hospice, so folks nearing end of life, and also their family members, loved ones, caregivers. Um, Assessing individuals is going to be our focus this week. So chapter 7 is what you're reading in the book. That'll be covering this week and next week, so you won't have as much reading next week, which is nice. But we'll cover families next week. So this is focusing on just one-on-one. We're going to talk about the biopsychosocial, spiritual, and intake, or the initial visit, uh, what to cover, Obviously your situation is going to be a little bit different, but we're kind of generalists as social workers. So kind of an overview of what you want to touch on each time. Collaboration, what that looks like. The timeline for assessments, because it's not just a one and done. We do need to, continuously do it, and it's a living document, right? Um, we also are introducing scales and measurements, and I have some thoughts about that, so I wanted to share those. And then I've got some tips and tricks for y'all, just from my experience, and from my perspective and my work experience. So hopefully this will help. So if we break down the biopsychosocial, cultural, spiritual assessment, I mean, so the biological is medical history, the individual's medical history, but also any family history that's relevant. So, medical history, mental health history, diagnoses that might impact their functioning, like anything with the thyroid, traumatic brain injury, if they experienced anything uh, like an accident or something like that. It also talks about developmentally. We usually like to touch on that. So usually I'll try to ask my clients, do you remember your parents ever saying like, hey, you you didn't talk right away, or you were walking before the other kids, those kinds of things. Psychological is obviously the symptoms that we're talking about, mental health diagnoses, prior mental health diagnoses, or what they currently have diagnosed. I would also say between the biological and psychological too, it's good to get an idea of what medications they're on. I should also say biological, and this comes into the psychological as well, but if they have any chronic illnesses like chronic pain, inflammation, all of these things can kind of exacerbate psychological symptoms, and vice versa. Social, who is in their environment? Who do they live with? Where do they live? Is it an apartment? Is it, a house? Who owns what? Do they feel safe? Do they feel like they have a safe space, to come home to? Is their housing secure? Um, this also kind of touches on financials as well. Like, is everything okay financially? Do you have any concerns there? This is where we can come in with some resources. Cultural is we're hitting on, what's important to you. Like when you were growing up, what was your family life like? What was important to your family, and how has that been passed down to you. Like it can help really inform perspectives if we include the cultural piece of this as well. um and spiritual, I think I was very lucky to have gotten hospice experience when I did, because the spiritual piece is something that we all hold, right? It's not something that it's like, oh, your faith is this. Okay, cool. Bye. It can be a source of great strength and comfort and resources if you are connected to a spiritual community. But also, I think we all go through these major, existential questions in our lives, like, why am I here? What am I doing? What's my purpose? So that ties into the spiritual as well. Like, what gives your life meaning? What's important to you? And how does that manifest? Like, how do you work towards those things that are most important to you? So generally in an assessment, you're going to want to start with what their symptoms are. Like, why are we here? What are we doing? um, and most importantly, within that, it's not just like, oh, you're feeling depressed. Okay. It's like, what does that feel like? What does that look like? When people talk to me about their anxiety, I ask them, like, where is it in your body? When you start to feel panicked, are there any physical sensations that accompany it? Um, just trying to track the symptoms, how frequent they're experiencing them, especially if we're talking like a panic attack, um, and also how those symptoms that they're experiencing impact their ability to live their day-to-day lives. So, especially when we're talking about like insurance companies, you got to justify the treatment. And so that means that you really need to sit down and be like, okay, where are you wanting to go and what's preventing you from doing that? Okay, cool. That not only helps you diagnose, but also helps you figure out like a treatment plan and like map out goals to get to, SMART goals. Um, and yeah, you can include the client in that conversation, like that individual in front of you, like what's important to you? What do you want to do? And if it's not achievable, I mean, hospice, like people would say, well, I want to live, you know? And it's like, okay, well, are there any particular things you're wanting to do? Because, all of our lives come to an end at some point. And so what's most important to you right now, I wish I could change that, right? But I don't have that power. So with what we have in this moment right now, what's most important to you and what do you want to work towards? What do you want to use this time for? It's also really important, especially from the social work perspective, to emphasize strengths. What's already going well? What's working? What's worked for you in the past, right? Um, and just I think it's easy to flag all the things that are going wrong, but the strengths are where you build from, right? It's not that you build from the symptoms or from what's going wrong. It's that you try to find the strengths to then um start building off of those. um we don't want the assessment to just feel like a summary of everything that's bad or not going well. um for me too, like now coming into therapy, like one-on-one individual therapy sessions, as the therapist, what does the client have like a prior diagnosis, um if they do, or several diagnoses, does the client agree with it? Do they feel like it fits their symptoms? All of that. Did they have any prior treatment? Have they seen a therapist before? Were they ever hospitalized for mental health conditions? What worked? If they did see a therapist before, what worked for them? What didn't? Why? You know, because like when I'm establishing a connection in a therapeutic relationship with somebody, I want to understand what approaches turned them off to doing the work, because it takes a lot of energy and effort and courage, I think, for some folks to get to the point where they see a therapist or ask for help or come to, an organization and say, I need some resources, I need some support. So, if they've already done some of the work, how do we kind of skip past the stuff that didn't work already, Collaboration. So, uh, utilize your supervisors, your colleagues, your peers. Obviously, keep PHI like uh, to a minimum. But when you don't know or when you have questions, ask. Um, a lot of the assessment piece is just kind of doing it a few times and figuring it out, and figuring out what works for you, because there's going to be a way that's more natural for you that you'll find once you understand kind of the pathway through an assessment. And I might be biased towards this, but if you are given consent by the client, the individual in front of you, to collaborate with their other care providers, their PCP, their prior therapists or psychiatrists or other care providers that are important to them, um, collaborate. I mean, that's part of what we do, is we try to do the whole picture, whereas every discipline seems to be siloed otherwise. And so, unless you're working in an interdisciplinary team setup like I was in hospice or in dialysis care, you can be that proactive person to be like, hey, what's going on with this thing? Or this client is saying, or this person is saying, hey, I'm in pain. Why are we not helping them? Or, you know, that kind of thing. So the timeline with assessment, if they're outpatient, they are going to need an assessment at the beginning and then yearly, just to make sure that you're still making progress towards goals, and that things can change and shift if needed, but yearly tends to be the standard there. If you're in home, like so home based therapy, or work is quarterly, so once every 3 months. Inpatient is monthly, because that's more intensive. So it kind of the frequency increases when the level of acuity increases, I guess I would say. Let's see here. Using scales and measurements. So this week's activities include a solo exercise where you complete one of the scales yourself. So one of those is like the PHQ-9. A lot of doctors' offices will just standard like hand this out no matter who you are. So a lot of people have seen it. Um, Something I will say about the PHQ-9, which is more for depression and anxiety. Um, well, depression in particular. The GAD-7 is for generalized anxiety disorder. Those two I think are the most common. People know how to answer those in order to not score high enough to raise a red flag. And also, it's almost like it's become ubiquitous. Like you see it everywhere. And if doctors' offices use it, it almost kind of makes it less of a psychological thing, because it's not usually addressed, in the kind of way that I think it's meant to be, where it's a discussion about one's mental health. Um, the other thing I will say too is you see it enough, you memorize the questions. PHQ-9 too, they one of the questions is like, do you struggle to concentrate when you watch TV or read the newspaper? It's like it feels kind of dated. And so I don't know, it's just scales can be useful, but when I was working, I actually worked at True Pace, um, the program for all-inclusive care for the elderly in Lafayette. And they use the slums as like a measurement of like memory and ability to recall. And I don't think so. You can it's like a score of like 30 or something. I don't think I would score like a 25 out of 30 because it's hard for me to remember things. And the scale, it doesn't change. So I had people that had memory issues that were scoring 30 out of 30 on the slums because they had been given the exact same test multiple times. So just be aware when you're using your scales that they can be useful, especially if you're trying to justify modality to like an insurance company. You can use it for like a baseline. There are so many different types of testings, like scales that are available, that I mean, pretty much anything you want to do, even the DSM includes their own. Um, so it can be used for good purposes, but I would say also just be wary of overusing them or relying on them too much because um, they can be a good kind of baseline, but obviously we need to do the work and understand how the client is interpreting the various answers as well, if that makes sense. Um, mhm. I wanted to end this particular video with my tips and tricks. I have a Krishnamurti quote here. It is no measure of health to be well adjusted to a profoundly sick society. I don't know what your political beliefs are or anything like that, and I don't need to know that you're probably stressed out. I think a lot of people are. It seems like ever since COVID, uh, things have just been harder for a lot of folks, myself included, the people I love included, a lot of people that I know and love, and my friends, all of that, colleagues. Um, it makes sense if people are not well right now. Um, so let me take you through my tips and tricks here. Have you ever been to a therapist? If not, I mean, through the school, they offer free sessions, so I would recommend maybe connecting. Um, and trying out a therapist, like just seeing what it's like being on that side of things. Um, if you have been to a therapist before or several therapists, right? Like, what did you like about each person that you met? What was weird or not great? Did you enjoy it? Did you not? Why? Like, what was their office space like? How did they ask questions? How did they make you feel? Those are all like things that you can draw from, right? Um, what's your way of connecting with people? I started working in retail and I worked on phones. I worked at a few banks in their call centers. And so I can tell you I learned how to do assessments and talk to people on the phone because it was uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable. Like, and people's money, people like get really sensitive about that. So, I think I learned to use humor. Like, I cannot tell you how many times I make fun of my pink hair, and it just for me, it's an authentic way of connecting with folks and letting them know that I don't take myself too seriously, so they don't need to like be so serious about whatever's happening. Like they can just be themselves. Um, but that's what works for me. Like whatever your way is connecting to people, like that's lean into it, use it. Um, none of us are perfect, right? So model it, model your imperfection, normalize it so that when stuff happens, because it always will, um, and this is no matter where you work, right? Whether it's one-on-one therapy in an organization, meso, macro, like, be the imperfect person, right? Who just owns it and like is able to still be professional and carry on with it because then it allows other people to uh admit their mistakes when that happens. And then we can all learn from each other and move on. At least that's how I see it. Let your work help dictate the assessment and like what is most important, right? So like depending on the population you work with, the organization you work with, if you work for yourself, um they're going to be able to kind of highlight like so for me end of life when I was in hospice it was what's most important to you right now, are you in pain? That was something we always asked. um the work that you do and the population you work with is going to help very much like outline what of the assessment needs to get done. Because next point here, you won't get everything in the initial assessment, and that's okay. Um, there's just no way. People have had a whole lifetime before encountering us, and there's just no way to capture all of it. You'll figure out what works for you and what doesn't as far as finding those most important aspects to touch on. Um, I like to, so I don't know, again, I'm an elder millennial, so To Write Love on Her Arms is an organization that I really love, and I have ever since I was in high school. Um, there's a quote from there where it's just like presence over perfection. So I'm not here to get it right. I'm here to be present with you and to like witness you in whatever you're going through and to try to help direct or give some direction based on what you tell me is where you want to go. Um, this next point comes back to the quote here about it. Um, your client's thinking makes sense to them. And so whatever their perspective, whatever their experience, even if it's, what we would consider maybe profoundly like, I don't know, low self-esteem or, that they hate themselves so much, right? Like whatever they have had to go through to get to this moment in time worked to get them this far. So if it makes sense to them, we don't have to like change that necessarily, but like where do they want to go and how do we get there, right? So I think one of the great things about being a social worker, and one of the terrible things about being a social worker is that you see everybody's side of things. Um, and that can be a little overwhelming, um, just to hold all of it, and to understand how far somebody has to come to get to a point of acting a certain way or doing a certain thing. Um, the other thing I will say, when I was in school at MSU Denver, I joined NASW Colorado, and it really helped me a lot. Like when I did not know where to go with questions, like in the program, all of that, I went to NASW and they helped me out. There are some really great benefits. I think I mentioned this before. I'm on the NASW Rhode Island board. So I'm on Rhode Island's chapter. Like I'm part of the board there. I think it's useful, especially right now, feeling so isolated, being able to have a group that you can come back to and ask questions and participate in, like actively participate in if you want to. Um, so yeah, uh, I hope all of you are well. I'm going to try to get the next lecture recorded and out soon. Um, and yeah, cool. All right. Have a good week.